Hi, my name is Campbell Young, and I chose to do a reader response for my video project, and I chose to do it over the primary text, What Happened Till the First Supply. The purpose of this text is to kind of show the struggles faced and the overwhelming amount of perseverance that the early settlers had. The text also describes the beginning of the settlement and interactions with indigenous people and just setting up leadership in general within the new colony. What drew me to this text? What mostly drew me to this text is the title. Before I had previously written and taken notes on this at the start of the unit, the title, What Happened to the First Supply, just really jumped out at me because I wanted to know what happened to the first supply. I wanted to know, was there something big that occurred, or was there something small that occurred? Or, what occurred till the first supply? So that really jumped out at me, and I just thought, it's very intriguing, and I needed to know what happened to the first supply. So that really jumped out at me when I was choosing a primary text to use. I thought that's the one I want to use. And then another thing that really jumped out to me was the realistic portrayal of colonial life. Now, I drew a picture of my realistic early colonial life. It's obviously not as realistic as the descriptions, but that's how I was perceiving it. And I'm also just not very good at drawing, but just after reading the first few sentences of the text, I could see how vividly John Smith explains stories that occurred in the early settlements, and just how vividly he explains how it was set up and the steps they took to get there. And the text just drew me in with each sentence I read. For example, John Smith says, Smith, little dreaming of that accident, being got to the marshes at the riverhead, 20 miles in the desert, had his 2 men slain. And that alone, along with the interactions with the indigenous people and other tragedies they faced, is what really drew me in to the portrayal that they were using to describe the colonial life. How does this text make me feel? This text makes me feel an overwhelming amount of patriotism, gratitude, and even a little bit of sorrow. And I drew this American flag to show the patriotism that I feel. I just think that the text really invokes feelings of patriotism by showing just how much it took to become the country we are today. And I'm very proud of the country we are today. The text kind of describes the starvation, death, tragedy, sickness, that the people faced who came before us, as well as the perseverance it took to become the country that we are today. Reading the sacrifices and the tragedies just brought me great sorrow for the people who had came before me, but also a wave of gratitude for the sacrifices they made. The text makes me very proud to be an American and very grateful of the sacrifices that were made before me. And I'm very grateful because I know that because of them, I can live in a country with freedoms and liberties that a lot of people are not living currently. And I'm extremely grateful for that. And then, what elements of the text are meaningful to me and why? Now, this one took me a bit longer to think, because there's really a lot of meaningful parts within this text. But I think the most meaningful thing that jumped out to me was the indented breaks in the text. So throughout the text, there will be stories, descriptions, and then there will be a break in the text. And then there will be very profound words, and then ending, and then text goes on again. So there's just a bunch of breaks and indentions within the text. For example, one of the breaks within the indention, it says, thus God, unboundless by his power, made them thus kind, would us devour. So each one of these breaks are spoken with such authority and emphasis that it can't help but make me almost feel as though I'm a part of what's occurring, or I'm a part of what's going on in the colonists' minds almost. But it just makes me feel like I'm experiencing that and I'm there, and it just makes my thoughts turn. It's very thought-provoking and meaningful text. It also captures extra insights on what it's like being in the early settlements. So it kind of looks like this. There will be text, and then a break in the text with an indentation, and it says thus God, unboundless by his power, and then keeps going on, and then there's more text underneath. But the indentions are just super meaningful and super powerful, and that's what just was super meaningful throughout the text for me. But after reading all of this text several times and taking several notes, I am very glad I chose to do a response to this one. I think the text is very intriguing and informative, and it's also a very true document of the losses, victories, and development within the early American settlement. And I think that if you have time, reread it, go into depth, because it's very much a very thought-provoking and mind-turning piece of literature. And what ways does this text have relevance today? The text has a lot of relevance today because it is literally a text explaining how our country was formed, and what we know about our country's history today. It's a account of America's history. And the text just shows what the early settlers experienced, and it includes a lot of concepts of leaderships and relations with indigenous people that are still relevant and that we still are using today. And the text also shows, as a country, how we were able to adapt and learn, which is still something that we're doing today with several situations and several things that still occur today. We are learning and adapting as a country. And I think that's how it kind of pulls in relevance to today. And the verse I chose, the excerpt I chose to read that was meaningful and interesting to me was, "Thus you may see what difficulties still cross any good endeavor, and the good success of the business being thus oft brought to the very period of destruction. Yet you see what strange means God hath still delivered it. As for the insufficiency of them omitted in commission, that error could not be prevented by the electors, there being no other choice, and all strangers to each other's education, qualities, or disposition." This text is specifically interesting to me, especially in line 1, because it kind of highlights how the early colonists survived, and it kind of shows that even though the odds were against them, that they were able to persevere and survive. The excerpt is also interesting to me because it gives credit to the Lord for their survival, which we don't often see a lot. And I just think it's really refreshing to see that, because I believe that God has his hand in all of history and all pieces of history. And I think that he's a big part of like the country we are today. And like even in our Pledge of Allegiance, like under God, like I think our country was formed under God. And I just think that like that was very meaningful to me that he was mentioned within the excerpt, and that it's kind of talking that God delivered. And I just think that was really meaningful and interesting to me. And I also think in the text lines 4 through 6, it's interesting because we see that Smith ridicules the government, which is still something we see to this day, especially recently. And I just think that really jumped out at me and I thought was very interesting. But overall, I really enjoyed reading this text, and I was very excited to do this video project. And yeah, the end.